We gotta go to the bullpen. Welcome to the Highland Bullpen, the all-new podcast bringing America's pastime to Scotland's shores. It doesn't matter if you're a Hall of Famer heading for Cooperstown or you're fresh out of the minor leagues. This is the podcast for you.
So hello everyone and welcome to the latest episode of the Highland Bullpen. And just for your confusion today, this evening, this morning, whenever you're listening, I'm solely joined by the two Daves. So I will variously refer to Dave and ask him to come and answer a question, and both of them will look equally bemused or they will both jump in at the same time. But I'm sure we'll manage to get this rolling well. And no doubt the fact we're rolling well is one of the reasons that Dave Sr. has now become an international podcast star and was recently invited to feature on our friend Rob Fontenot's Astros podcast. So do you want to tell us a wee bit about that, Dave, and how the Yorkshire accent was welcomed in Texas?
Yeah, I think they do like British accent, don't they? I think probably the Scottish accent would be even better, but... Yes, it was just sort of Saturday lunchtime. I was just lazing around, sort of a bit dishevelled, and just got this direct message on Twitter from Rob. I think I've referred to him as Rob Fontenot before, but it's Rob Fontenot.
Yeah, I guess it would be that French silent T.
Yeah,
French would it be? Yeah.
I almost said to him, but I wasn't sure whether, it just sort of came to me at the time. But Rob Fontenot is fun to know.
Well done.
Probably just as well I didn't say that, actually. So, so I got this. He said that he wanted to record a podcast. We follow each other on Twitter, and we have engaged quite a bit offline, non-baseball stuff. He's recently got married, and, it's an all-round good guy. So... he just said, do you want to join me if you're not doing anything? So I sent him a message back saying straight away, yeah, okay. And he set it up, and we talked for about 45 minutes and then wrapped it. And then I got a message back saying that, unfortunately, the sound at his end, I don't think he has internet connection, or not a very good one. So in his normal podcast, it's the Astros Baseball podcast, regular ones. He does 2 or 3 a week, or possibly even more. Sometimes he does one after every game. It can be just like a 15-minute summary. I think he does it on his phone, so it wasn't broadcastable quality, and that's not just because of my input. But so we did it again. So we just slightly different. It was just went down a different avenue, but. It was really, really good, and it's not that we aren't professional on that, but he's very experienced, and he interviews people from the Astros organization, players. My favorite, Bob Dynamite, the guy who drives the train. So
one of your heroes, Dave.
He is my hero, and imagine he got to see him in the flesh. It was like my mate Mike Daly from Glasgow used to. He's a sort of music impresario, and he used to work at Queen Margaret University, and he put on all the acts there. And his claim to fame is that he put on Frank Sidebottom a couple of times, and he has seen him without his papier-mâché head on. So there you are. So,
not many people have done that.
No, I was usually in character, wasn't I?
What do you mean without?
Yeah. Sorry, Dave. Sorry. Yeah, so he did send a few topics, and we talked about, obviously, the lockout is the big subject, and since Saturday, I think there's been some encouraging signs, but we talked about the fact that due to the lockout, it's going to be a very late spring training. I think the Red Sox wanted to start spring training in the middle of February, and Rob said a very interesting thing which I hadn't considered before. But I think when they had that truncated season, the COVID season, they didn't have much of a spring training. There was a lot of players got injured, and it's not just a fun game, 4 or 5 weeks, fun games at the spring training in Florida. It's actually absolutely necessary for these guys to get, as we call it, a pre-season. They need to get fit, fully fit, match fit, so that they're ready for what is an incredible slog, isn't it? 162 games over whatever it is, 6 or 7 months. And, I was thinking back to, and I sort of jokingly said, well, baseball, traditionally, if you go back 50, 60 years, a bit like cricket, it weren't necessarily the toned athletes that they are now. You would get sort of quite big guys in cricket and baseball. But I think they're a different breed now, aren't they? And but I did speculate. I wonder if some players come back for spring training after their winter break, and some have looked after themselves a little bit better than others. I remember when I was in Edinburgh and the Hibernian Football Club, and every season the manager used to get mad with Gordon Hunter, who had just done nothing, absolutely nothing over the winter break, and would invariably in the first game sort of tweak his groin or something and be out for a couple of weeks. So yeah, I'm sure all that is. It's
interesting what you say about the sort of fitness levels, because they obviously are athletes. Their arms, when you see the size of their arms, you think these boys have got tree trunks, and that's where their strength comes from. But you do see the odd one who looks a wee bit portly, shall we say, perhaps. But no doubt the fitness coach will have them training on the right things. I think young Dave, you might have some thoughts or knowledge on the injury issues that they potentially have, or some facts.
Thanks. I thought you were bringing me in to talk about the portly state of affairs, Alan. That's kind of you. Again, just having a wee look and a bit of listen to some other podcasts over the last few weeks. The lockout is really frustrating all fans, regardless of your geographical location. As long as you're a baseball fan, I think it's just pretty frustrating just now. I know it's something that I'll touch on later, but a couple of wee points when Dave spoke about injuries. So from what I can research, there are 1,200 MLB players just now in the MLB union, there were in 2021.
That would be right, yeah.
And just to give you an idea, 800 of those spent time in the injured list last season, which is pretty phenomenal. I'll let you do the maths. That's 1 in 10. No, so 800 of 1,200 players spent time in the injury list. 99 hamstring injuries, which again for a sport like that is something else. And again, on average, players were taking 28 days out to recover from those injuries.
On average, those 800 are 28 days out.
I think that was just the hamstrings, Alan.
The hamstrings, yeah.
Again, in particular, where this argument was coming from is that you had the truncated season in 2020.
Yes.
So for those of you that kind of weren't familiar, the baseball season was restricted to, I think, around about 60 games in 2021, going into 2020, and in 2021, going back to a full season, there was some real concerns, again highlighted by Dave there around the pitching, that players haven't been used to playing for a full season. And I think that was, so again, the numbers that I've brought in there, 800 of 1,200, really shows that players' injuries, players' health really need to be taken into consideration. So there's real concern around spring training for 2022. Again, some of the research that I've been doing, pitchers, they'll have been working out since December, quite many of those, either their own backyard, local clubs, or at their own sort of facilities. And batters themselves, from what I can see, yes, the feeling is just now that If a deal can be done by the end of February, that's good news. The sooner the better. And that gives 4 weeks ahead of opening day. However, quite often batters want 4 weeks of games, let alone actual getting into any sort of good physical conditions. So anything, and again, I don't want to spoil anything that we're talking about later, but there really is some concerns around health and injuries going into spring training. So sorry, Dave, I didn't mean to hijack that, but I thought it was pertinent to what you were talking about.
No, that would just completely backed up what Rob was saying in actual fact. And it does make sense, doesn't it? Because they need to be super fit and, they need to have their eye in, so to speak, don't they? So hopefully that's the latest news, isn't it? Things have moved on a bit from Saturday, and I believe they had a meeting yesterday. And although they seem to be a long way away from, that can't really possibly go into the ins and outs of the dispute, but they have, as you say, set a deadline for the 28th of February for negotiations to be agreed so they can start the season on the 31st of March. So that gives them that sort of 4 or 5 weeks spring training. So, and, sort of diplomatic speak, the way that they talk about meetings, I think they talked about the language being described as productive meeting. So that's a lot better than we've heard so far. So they're a long way away. I think part of the players, one example I saw was that this thing they have about the players before they reach arbitration, they can be on their sort of minimum salary, which is not too shabby, 600 grand a year, whatever it is. And but if they break through into the team and all of a sudden they're the best player on the team, and there's lots of players doing that, they've no way of negotiating an increase in their salary, and they can be the top player on the team. And, one guy's getting 25 million a year and they're getting 600 grand. So they'd offered some sort of pre-arbitration bonus pool, and the players are looking for something like a pool of 115 million. The MLB have raised it from 15 million, their offer from 15 million to 20, and the number of players who'd be eligible for it much less. So they're far apart on the numbers on the face of it, but it sounds to me as though they really almost committed to getting something done. Something's got to be agreed by the end of this month. Otherwise, as Rob was saying, it's the fans that'll suffer ultimately. The fans must be sat there shaking their heads. There's a lot of valid reasons why there's a dispute, but at the end of the day, the fans just want to see their team playing baseball.
Yeah, it just turned the conversation maybe to everyone's favourite topic of the Detroit Tigers, Dave. I've got a couple of things I was going to mention. That just our friend Detroit Dave, he, I don't think he's done this before, but he's actually booked a trip to watch spring training this year. So hopeful that goes ahead for him and he gets to see the Tigers down in Florida, get some sunshine after the Michigan winters. But you also discussed, is it the Pecota rankings with Rob, and both of you came up with a rather bizarre conclusion as to which of our 4 teams would finish 4th this season. Do you want to tell us a wee bit about that, maybe?
Yeah, he mentioned these Pecota ratings, and I think I had heard of them, but I was by no means familiar with them. And I've looked it up since, and it's an acronym, player. It's PECOTA, and it's Player Empirical Comparison and Optimization Test Algorithm. It's a rather contrived acronym, but there you are. So they rate the players on what they're doing, minute detail, and taking into account sort of not just the normal stats, but good luck and bad luck and who they're playing against and whatnot.
Yeah.
And on that basis, they make predictions, quite specific predictions, about how a team will progress. But I tried to have a look today, but you need to be subscribed to them to get the information. So I didn't bother doing that at this stage. But if it's going to be useful, might have a look. But yeah, so he read out. We discussed the 4 teams that we follow on the Highland Bullpen, and I have to say, he's a good lad. But every time I mentioned the Tigers, he just had a little grin, and I suppose
I didn't see that.
There's quite a connection between them. Is that Hinch is the manager, isn't there? And there's actually some suggestion that Carlos Carrea, who's out of contract and he's free agent, the incredibly good shortstop at the Astros, might have gone to the Tigers, but he's looking for one of these mega contracts, sort of like 300 million plus. So I'm not sure whether the Tigers are in that kind of territory. But yeah, he was saying that the Pecota rankings have got the Tigers predicted to win 68 point something games, which both of us just, sort of raised collective eyebrows at that and just thought, well, my initial reaction to that was, yeah, they had a poor start to the season last year, but there was a definite improvement as the season went on. There was a sort of you'll know better, Al, but they had a period where, they really were winning plenty of games, and I think they ended up with 77 wins.
Yeah, I think they had something like 3 winning months in the year. I think given how they started in the first few weeks, I would suggest that was reasonably good and optimism for the future. So the rankings would suggest that maybe a little bit of a backward step.
I don't see the logic in that, because they've got a manager, Hinch, who's he needs time with his players to get his ideas across. They've got some good young players coming through, haven't they? They've got that prospect, Torkelson, I think, is in the news today, because I don't think he's on the roster, is he? So he can, I think the minor leaguers can do training. So
that's right.
He was doing quite well. So I thought, with all my vast knowledge, that they will improve on last year. So that's anything above 77. You only need 82 wins, and you've got a winning season. So I think they might have a winning season. I'm not saying they're going to qualify for the playoffs, although the way things are going, there might be an extended number of teams in the playoffs again this season. But I think his own team, he's quite pleased. I mean, the Astros, if you look at them over the last 5 years, they must be possibly the most successful team in baseball in some respects. If you sort of looked at their 5-year, record. And I think he's got Pecota had them as 96.9 wins. I suggested we call it 97.
It's a fair shout, I think. Yeah. I'm wondering where they're getting the 0.9 from, but yeah.
Well, yeah, that probably shows that they go, they're going into real detail on this. But, he was quite pleased with that, and he reckons they will be competitive again. There's no reason to suggest why. But one thing he did say, he said he would be really impressed if they have made that winning prediction on the assumption that Carlos Carrea will not be an Astro next season, which looks almost certain that he won't be. So, that was very interesting. I can't remember what they were saying about the Red Sox and the Mariners in terms of projected wins, but he did ask for my predictions on the 4 teams. So,
go on, give us them.
All right. Well, I did say that I thought the White Sox would win their division. I think they would continue improving and playing well and be, obviously in the playoffs and be competitive in the playoffs. So that's as far as I went with that. I said the Red Sox would probably be next best and challenging for the playoffs through wild card again, similar to last season. I do like the fact that Alex Cora is a great manager, and it depends what happens with their roster, because I don't think they've acquired anybody as such. And just before the lockout, they lost Erod, didn't they? Did he go at the Tigers? The pitcher.
Yes.
Yeah. So, but yeah, I thought, Red Sox wild card contenders. And then the Mariners, I said, well, they did well last year and weren't far off qualifying themselves. I think a similar season, possibly improvement. And I reckoned, a winning season for the Tigers, maybe just not qualifying for the playoffs this season, maybe another year or two off of that. And he paid me a great compliment and just says, I totally agree with that, Dave. That's exactly what I wrote down as you were talking. So.
Well done. So, young Dave, what's your thoughts on our headline thoughts on the 4 teams for the season? White Sox back in the playoffs and going a wee step further in 2022?
Yeah, you've always got to be really careful and temper that with your own hopes rather than when it's down on paper. But no, the White Sox suffered a hell of a lot of injuries last year. As we spoke earlier, every team did. But our ones seemed to be to the guys we were reliant on at times. And we had a fantastic run through till around about August. And then I don't know if it's because the division was tied up quite early, but I think the foot came off the gas a little bit. And I think we petered out through the playoffs and hadn't made the splash that we hoped we would. The Astros are a tough opposition for anyone, but if you're going to win the whole thing, you've got to beat the best that's out there. So no, I feel good about the White Sox. We'll see what happens over the coming month, though. In terms of the other teams that we've got, I know we'll do this as a podcast over the coming weeks. But I quite like the fact I don't think we've got any Diddy teams in the from the
we weren't saying that at the start of this journey.
Mariners really, I think, impressed everybody last year. Not just through, I think the Tigers may have been more of a slow rise through the year, but I think the Mariners were really consistently strong. As I said, the Tigers really impressed. A pretty sloppy start to the year, to the season, and came on from there. And the Red Sox, that's just... I find divisions like that really hard to predict because you've got real heavy swingers in there, quite literally. You've got a division full of absolute monsters where, it's pretty tough going in there. So the Red Sox are just a colossus organisation, a fantastic club. I would see it very rarely they would let their fans down. I know Dave will, maybe jump in there. But a team like that in a division packed full of talent, I think objectively you look at it and you think you could really toss a coin and find anybody in there wins the division. So no, I think that our 4 teams always hold interest. It's nice if we can all be in amongst it in September. But I don't think we've got any Haddies in there at all.
Yeah. Well, let's before the season starts have a half-hour chat on our 4 teams and have some banter and realistic assessment of what's going to happen. So, go and give Astros Baseball podcasts a listen. I know we've got our 4 teams in here, but we enjoy chatting with Rob. He's a good guy. It's a great podcast, covers a lot of baseball stuff, and particularly for Astros fans. But don't let that put you off. Go for it. Cheers. You mentioned the injuries there for the White Sox. Was there something else you wanted to follow up on the injury stats you were talking about earlier?
It was just a little bit more about the lockout.
Sure.
If kind of open to that. So again, this time of year, there's no baseball. What tends to happen is every few years in baseball, there's a bargaining agreement. Yeah. And it's quite unique. I think it's, again, as a football fan, a Scottish football fan, or a kind of British football fan, you're used to this is what sports look like. Your season runs from then till then, and this is what happens. So I think when you try to acclimatise to a whole other sport, it's really quite interesting. So I'm not a fan of basketball or American football or hockey, so I don't quite know if that correlates amongst them all. But I find the whole MLB proposition really fascinating, and it makes for its own drama in kind of different ways. So anyway, this agreement is signed and negotiated. From what I can see, they maybe sign a contract that lasts 4 or 5 years at a time, 8 years, and things move along, and it's a real agreement between players and owners. So what I find really, really interesting is kind of two points that I kind of noted down. We are at this point talking about negotiating millionaires against billionaires here. And it's quite hard, as a working man, it's quite hard to have a dog in that fight when all we want is baseball. We might love the players, we might feel like the players because we've probably spent our careers fighting against our bosses to get better wages, so we can understand that part of the argument better. But it really comes down to you've got millionaires against billionaires there. I think 3 of the prominent players, quite literally for the players' union, are 3 of the heaviest paid players in the game. So which is quite an interesting take. The other thing that really, really interests me, and I've not heard anyone talk about this, so I could be really wrong here. If if Dave or Alan or Richard steps in with your boss to discuss your pay increase and your terms and conditions, you sit opposite your boss, perhaps even 2. You've got 30 clubs here, or 30 organisations. Again, Alan owns the Tigers, Dave owns the Red Sox. Alan could feel that the proposition put across by the players is absolutely fair, but Dave, as the Red Sox owner, does not. I wonder how they get those 30 owners to agree on anything, let alone, the players at least have a structure, they've got a voice, they've got a kind of purpose. But the owners, that must be quite tricky. And I know, is it Rob Manfred kind of heads everything up there?
Commissioner.
I think it says a lot. I think the players really despise the man, the fans despise the man, but the owners love him. And I think that maybe tells you how his negotiations have went. I think he's been involved with MLB for kind of 20, 30 years. I'm trying to put, I've been a business owner before. I'm trying to put that hat on. If you're an owner, you're reluctant to give up any profit as much as you can. And sometimes I think the way that the players are digging their heels in at present, I wonder if that's more a reflection on their willingness to give in and just accept things over the last 15, 20 years, because it feels like they've got to a point now. Again, from everything that I've read on MLB, and I've listened to various clubs' podcasts, the players are perhaps being a little bit, at every proposition that's given to them, they're just saying no. And we'll speak to you again in a week's time. As Dave alluded to earlier, there's been a bit of progress this week. They've set an agenda, they've set a schedule all this week to talk and to something that hasn't happened. And this blows my mind, considering they've knew for 5 years this agreement had to be signed. They've got to this point now where they would turn around, someone would say, here's our proposition. The other side would say, no thanks, and we'll see you in a week. And that's been happening over December, and there was a slight lockout talks. But we've got to this point now where you've got 2 opposing forces have been putting their statements out on Twitter or social media to kind of show the fans, hey, we're the good guys here, we're just trying to do what's right. And I think that all fans really care about is making sure they've got players and clubs to watch come opening day at the kind of end of March, start of April time. At the moment, you would say, from all that we've heard, it feels quite unlikely that opening day would go ahead. The feeling is that in past seasons, whenever they've had to condense seasons, it's not really worked. They've tried things like shortened games or double headers, and that's probably not helped players or fans too much. So the feeling is, if they do miss opening day this year, they may just miss games rather than catching up on them later on.
Okay, interesting. Well, one thing I maybe should say as well, when you talk about your own experience as being a business owner, I can't imagine Rob Manfred or the owners of the Tigers, or of the Red Sox or the Mariners putting on a golf day as well as you can, Dave. I can't see it. I can't see the pre-game entertainment, the during the game entertainment, and the post-game entertainment as well would never be beaten by these guys.
Thanks, Al. If you don't mind, there's another couple of wee points. I was just looking through my notes there to see what I'd missed. Years ago, when these collective bargaining agreements were made, again, you had Alan and Dave that were perhaps family men, and these clubs were family clubs where it was more personable, making that negotiation, making that agreement over the table. These 30 organisations now are businesses. They are made to, it's very hard to negotiate with these people, and they've been used to kind of having their own way for so many years. And again, it's not their fault if the other side agreed to it along the years, then they can make more money. That's great. However, where I do worry is that you have the other main sports in America, and you've got upcoming sports like soccer seems to be making a bit of headway into America. My fear would be that baseball is fast slipping behind a lot of other sports. Again, I'm not an American football fan, but from what I can see, and I tried that again this year, they, again, have a fantastic show. All of these playoffs games went to overtime. Fans were talking about them for days and days. You've got new heroes, you've got new villains, you've got new teams. It seems a really vibrant atmosphere. NBA, something similar. You've got big characters, you've got big clubs. It seems to be a lot more social savvy when it comes to marketing it to fans. Baseball, as much as we love it, and we love it for what it is, seems to be falling behind a wee bit, and they are pissing fans off if they come up with this every couple of years. Something else just to note when you come into a potential condensed season for next year, as much as restrictions have been lifted in name only just now in Scotland, across Britain for the last wee while, you've still got COVID to deal with. People will still contract COVID. Players suffered from COVID last season. They are suffering from COVID in the UK for football. So you still need to have those considerations in the world of baseball next year. So you can't have these condensed games or double headers because it's not going to lend itself well. And the other point, which again, I'm sure anyone that listens to our podcast, please do drop us a line whenever you've got kind of thoughts to either back us up or more interestingly on the contrary. But you've got over 300 free agents who are sitting without a club just now. So you've got kind of 900 players, you've got coaches and fans absolutely begging for spring training to kickstart. But you've also got 300 men out there that do not have a club that are going to be fought over. And historically, you could do that over November, December, January, February. Dave could be approached by 3 or 4 clubs. He travels out to Detroit, he travels to Chicago to negotiate. These men and these clubs have got to make decisions very quickly over who they want and when they want them. And it's going to be quite an interesting February or March, whenever proceedings kick off and when players can sign for clubs again. It really is, because you've got young guys out there going to get invited along to spring training. You've got the old guys, 35, 36, who are maybe looking for that one last contract, who knows? And they've all been gearing up towards spring training, getting their bodies ready. So it's going to be dog eat dog out there during negotiation periods to sign for new clubs.
Fascinating few points there. I'm always, as a sports fan, I'm always particularly interested in the one where you mentioned that the possibility of is MLB following behind the other sports. I think we probably collectively between us maybe have American football near the bottom of the list. I've got a trip planned for the States late March, early April, where I'm going to I'm currently planning to go to an NBA and a NHL game. In fact, NHL, coincidentally, and it is a coincidence, of course, I'm hoping to see the Red Wings for the first time. Just happen to be where I'm going to be playing, where I'm going to be. But yeah, it's a worry if baseball falls down the rankings. It's America's game. It's America's pastime. So if, as you say, they keep pissing people off and the other sports are much more media savvy, then there are problems there for baseball. So let's get it fixed. It's a game we love. So let's see how it goes. But I'll also, during the early months of the season, early weeks of the season, report back on my experiences at the other games. And I do actually also in that trip hope to fit in an opening day game. of the Durham Bulls. So yeah, minor league, but the famous Durham Bulls of Bull Durham fame. So opening day, I think, is something like Tuesday the 8th or whatever it is of April. So my plan is to be there, and I will report back on that. In terms of the lockout and the financial consequences, I'll maybe just leave the last line to our international correspondent, Dave, because one of the players turned down what we might consider a reasonable contract.
Yeah, it was something Rob mentioned, and it's Juan Soto, who I think he's a free agent now, and he turned down a 13-year deal with worth $350 million with the Nationals. Although in his favour, well, I don't know how we would view this here. If he said that he would prefer to go, he was less interested in the money and more in playing with a winning team. Now, the Nationals have admitted that they're in a rebuilding process, but we both thought, well, he's not going to do too bad wherever he goes, is he? So, you know, he not only wants the money, he wants to be a winner as well. But this is what the top players can demand, isn't it? You know, Mookie Betts is on a similar sort of deal. Francisco Lindor of the Mets. So we'll see what Carlos Carrea gets out of it. I think Rob was hoping that he might end up going with a Nationals team so that he doesn't come back to haunt the Astros too often in the regular season. So as Dave said, it is a bit difficult to feel sorry for the big guys who are earning these multi-million-dollar deals. But it is about fairness, isn't it? You know, and if you're worth that money and the players who are at the not the bottom of the pile, but are on the minimum salary, it's about them getting the fair share out of what is a multi-billion-dollar sports industry. So
amazing sums of money, and without knowing enough about it, my sympathies probably lie with the young guys or the journeymen at the other end of the scale who are part of the entertainment we enjoy. And I've mentioned they're going to minor league games. As sports fans, we'd like to maybe see a better distribution of the money. In fairness to Juan Soto, I've always been confused by footballers who they're going to be multimillionaires, whatever contract they sign. They might leave their boyhood club, where they're a multimillionaire, to become twice a multimillionaire by going to one of their rivals. I find that a little bit odd, but yeah, if you want to win trophies, you've also got to maximize your income. You don't know people's family situations and what have you. So it's, as someone who is financially nowhere near those levels, we need to go and live with that. So maybe one last thing on the baseball world. I know February's a big month for history, young Dave, and I think you might want to chat about something in a future episode that you're conscious of just now.
Yeah, so I think Dave done a good piece last year on Black History Month, and something as well that I know, Alan, you were really passionate about. You've done a good bit of research on some YouTube videos, some kind of mini documentaries. So I thought my turn to have a wee look this year, and I'm very well aware there's a bit of a White Sox legend, Minnie Minosa. So I won't kind of go into spoil it too much, but he is well known as the Cuban Jackie Robinson. And when you look at the numbers involved, the stats, what he went through, again, if you think about the abuse that Jackie Robinson took, we're all very familiar with Jackie and the kind of amazing man that he was and what he'd done to help baseball along the way. I was really quite interested, firstly a White Sox guy, but then someone with that type of history as well. So I'll be doing a wee bit on Minnie Minosa in the coming weeks. So it'll be really quite interesting for me. And again, it's a chance to brush up on some White Sox history.
Great. Thank you. We look forward to that. We always enjoy a wee bit of history in the bullpen. We hope our listeners do too. So thanks for joining me tonight, gents, and talking about the lockout. I appreciate Dave Senior joining us. I know he's in demand around the world. So good he's managed to join us here tonight as well. And thanks everybody for listening.